Hello and welcome to another Not Chilly podcast. We're up to episode 21. We're getting close to the end of season 2 here, and where we'll take a little bit of a hiatus over the Christmas break and come back kicking even harder with season 3 of the Not Chilly podcast. On episode 21, Josh and I are watching the film First Man, and we're both like space nerds, which is a really interesting aspect of this particular film because though it has a lot of kind of geeky, nerdy stuff about space travel, it's also a lot to do with the human story of a person, and it really like emphasizes that through the story. And so as space nerds, we can appreciate the small little details, but as a film itself, we got to get into the mind of Neil Armstrong and really kind of see how his experience of going to the moon really was. So sit back and enjoy episode 21, and thank you very much for being a part of this. Coca-Cola, please be our sponsor. We'll take anyone's money, please.
Whenever there is school, there's always homework. Whenever there's a beach, there's always a towel. Whenever there is fun, always a one. Whenever there is fun, always Coca-Cola.
Okay.
That's why jingles are fucking evil.
Yeah, totally.
And I remember another one, Kit Kat.
When we do, we'll do the Pixar series, but when that moment in and out with that amazing like jingle that happens in there, and the stupid memory guys occasionally just send the jingle back up just to shit people off. I think it's so good.
I remember that. I'll watch it again.
Oh, dude, we'll watch it again. Watch the whole like round of it, but like Inside Out.
Do you have it on blurry?
Yes, I got. I think I've got everything I like on Blu-ray.
Wow.
I love
everything you like on Blu-ray.
No, everything I like on Pixar.
I love that picture. I have it on Blu-ray.
Yeah, man. I have everything. I took photos.
That was such a good day. I have it on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
It's my favorite song. I have it on Blu-ray.
Got all my podcasts on Blu-ray.
Oh, my favorite planet is Mars. I have it on Blu-ray.
Oh my god. This is... Speaking about Mars and traveling in space.
The Martian!
Yeah, let's talk about The Martian, which we got to do as well, because I actually have feels about that, and so do you. We actually would have a conflict of interest.
Not of interest, but just a conflict.
Sure. I don't know the difference, but but it would actually be an interesting conversation. Whilst The First Man, I don't think we have very much to conflict on, but we definitely have a lot to talk about.
I thought it was good.
Yes. The end. Good podcast, buddy. Had a great time.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
Definitely not the alt-right men's rights activist film that weird article I read.
Yeah, you told me about that, and I was already like, I was trying.
I was looking for it as well. I'm like, where is this?
I mean, like, yeah, but if it was anything to do with the times, then no, but no.
It's just not. It's so much of the article's criticism was to do with omission. I mean, it even got to the point where it said it was something about, like, it addressed the fact, where are the characters from Hidden Figures? Where are these? But it's like...
Because it's a freaking film about Neil Armstrong.
Yeah,
it's not about
that one that like time that he interacted with them.
Where's like, the freaking flag going into the moon? Like a close up of that. Where's the like?
Yeah, that's right. He was going on about the flag and stuff like that. Like, and it was in a big wide shot. It didn't make any sense. Yeah. And the only other stuff that said United States was as you go up the side of the craft.
Yeah, you see it.
United
That's
States.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's what it looked like from the lift.
Yeah.
What do you suppose?
You want to censor that?
It was so bizarre.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I mean, and personally, there's a lot to say about his wife, whose name was Janet. I think her name was
Jane, Janet, something like that. It was
Janet Armstrong. I'm pretty sure that's not good. I'm not going to continue to talk about her as the wife.
No, good point.
Janet.
That's a very healthy idea.
Yeah, it was Janet Armstrong. I was right there. Yeah. So, yeah, and I thought that there was tons of depth to her and a really good so far as you could when a film was about a specific person and their emotional state and their experiences. So far as you could address how that impacts on others, I think that they did her story very well. A series I've always thought that would be really interesting, and this is something that was addressed in the amazing HBO series From Earth to the Moon,
which I haven't seen yet, but I'm going to.
So good. I think the second last episode of the series is called The First Wives or something like that. It's like a The First Wives Club, that comedy film, had come out like soon, and it was called, I think it was an allusion to that, sort of the original First Wives or whatever. And because of how much divorce happened. So the whole episode was dedicated to the experience of the wives of the astronauts. And that episode made me think, what a series it would make.
Yeah. The whole thing just yeah, totally.
And it would be so lovely to see something. It would have been really great, but budgetarily it just wouldn't have been a thing. I don't know if you've ever seen like Flags of Our Fathers. So it's this war film, and Clint Eastwood directed, but he made two films at the same time. He made Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. So Flags of Our Fathers is about the people who invaded the island of Iwo Jima and took it from the Japanese as a stepping stone, allegedly, to get to Tokyo. And Letters from Iwo Jima is a film all in Japanese with Japanese actors about the experience of the Japanese being overrun by the Americans.
Yeah.
And so they're these two films about the same thing. From different perspectives. The only real difference is the way that they cover the American one is quite different, because it was about the guys who held the flag up, and then they got turned into these big PR people to get people excited about war bonds and all that kind of stuff. Whereas the Japanese one is really just the Americans coming to, the point where you were either a prisoner or, because like it was just so fucked up with the culture of the Japanese military at the time is so horrible. You see lots of crazy shit, and it's really hard to appreciate it without either documentary or film, photography, all that kind of visual evidence. When you read it on page, it's so different. And so it was really interesting, and it made me think afterwards, like, God, it would have been so amazing to have like, this be one film and then have sort of
Wives is another.
Yeah, like the astronaut wives films.
There certainly was a feature-length story in there. If the film wasn't actually about Neil Armstrong, then it was a story that should have been told. But to be honest, it was a film about Neil Armstrong, and there could be a whole film about the other thing, but then it would just have detracted from the main person of the story.
Yeah, it would have detracted from us following him in the at all costs mentality that he has.
Yeah.
That we get into that mindset and we acknowledge what it's costing and how we feel about it as an audience. We're audience member. It's fine. We can sit there and judge him.
Yeah.
As an audience member in the film, and we can think about whatever we want in terms of the context of history. But you have to choose. You have to choose someone to follow.
Yeah.
And
we were talking about this today about like what movie was it? It was a movie that you had seen recently at a thing, and you're talking about like the difference between telling a story, which is just like every bit of information, take it, just whatever, just take the information, and actually being like, what's the heart of the story? What's the purpose of the story? What's the point?
Yeah.
And that's what the point of this was. Granted, I understand that like there is a huge story to be told on the wife of, and they touch on it, certainly.
I think they more than touch on it.
Oh,
I'm not saying that they develop it completely, but I mean, I thought I was so connected to her character.
Me too.
I mean, that's who I was with.
Even her silence. There was so much of her
absolutely.
Just like wanting to say something but didn't, and then having that like having that break, spoilers on history, whatever. Having that break on him when he's just about to leave on the mission. Like where she snaps, Like we see it throughout the course of the film of her slowly like breaking down and slowly like not ever getting a word out of him.
Because in a non-traditional sense, she emotionally abused.
Yeah.
Right? She's emotionally abused by distance and
well, she's not allowed to
not being let in.
Not being allowed to confront the issues of a lost child with the person that should be the most person you could talk to about that,
Which is kind of the only scene that doesn't exist in the film, really, is the scene where it's like, you think I'm not feeling this too? But I felt that in all of her scenes.
I also felt that within that scene where, like, one of the first scenes of the film, where he goes into the room and he has a breakdown. Like I feel like it was explained, but it wasn't. There was no moment where they're together having that argument.
Yeah, I think one thing I really love about the relationship between them in the film is that on the surface, she's the strong one. That's the interesting thing in the film, is that she's the strong one. She's the glue in the family. She's the one that
to look up to. In a weird kind of
and
way.
She's there for him at any time he's really ready to talk.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to that in a sec, but he's the crippled one emotionally. He's the broken one. He's the one who is failing.
Yeah.
And despite what happens at the end of the film, I don't feel that he succeeds. I don't think that it's one of those things you didn't resolve it. You might have, taken her bracelet, your daughter's bracelet, and dropped it into a thing on the moon to symbolize,
letting go.
Yeah. But we know that in your head, achieving this thing that will be a singular achievement that is evidenced for the rest of the existence of humanity was still not enough for you.
Yeah.
Not from a competitive perspective, which is the interesting thing about him as a person.
Yeah.
Not from that perspective, but from how far do I have to go to be able to make my work fulfill me? How do I feel? How do I plug this hole up? And it's like, by talking to your wife.
Well, that's what I was about to say.
It's like, no, I go as far away as any human being ever has in the history of humanity. That's what I do.
To myself there.
Yeah.
And as proof.
It's that's what I think is amazing about the film, and why I think is so successful about the relationship aspect of it, because I think that part is incredibly well done, and it paints him beautifully as the sad figure. I mean, it's that thing of, and what I mean by evidence and all that kind of stuff. The difference between Neil Armstrong and every other person that's ever done anything separates. So, he's the last person that did a thing that was really human exploration, right?
Yeah.
James Cameron going to the bottom of the ocean, all that kind of stuff. It's a feat of earthbound achievement.
Yeah.
Right? It is incredible, and it's comparable to space travel. But that's not how we as a culture feel that. It's sort of like, yeah, we know our planet, even though we
really don't.
We've explored a higher percentage of the solar system than we have with probes than we have seen of the ocean in terms of volume, I believe. And the huge factor of it is not only is it's not just because it's the moon, it's because it was photographed and filmed and radioed and that didn't happen when, and I say this in quotations, when the first men landed in the New World, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the things that obsesses me sort of in terms of imagination is, and I'd love to see it in a film, is reading Sapien.
Okay. Oh, I've heard of this book, yeah.
And I'm not actually reading. I'm using the audiobook. It's making me go through books so much quicker.
Audible.com, please.
Yeah.
Give us
sponsor this like you do every single other podcast in the world.
I have 15 people that are willing to listen to your sponsorship.
And what I wouldn't give to have a camera to go back to when the first Aboriginal Australians, first human beings, the first white people, first humans put their foot on the sand of the shores of Australia. And it's funny that I had that parallel, because now I've said it, I remember in Sapien, he says those are like the two biggest, most significant moments in human history, is like landing on the moon and Aboriginal Australians setting foot in Australia, because of what we then saw. Because Australia was isolated so much from archaeology and paleontology, we can see what humans are in their raw, most
untainted is maybe the word. I know what you mean. Though, like it's isolated.
In our most pure human form, basically. Yeah. What do we do when we arrive somewhere? And we don't know, right? Yeah. We do. We destroy things, and.
Too bad to Mars.
And on one level, yes, the Aboriginal, it's really well done in Sapien. Anyone should listen to it. But just like, and what they basically say is how they amazingly tamed the land, and we've only just begun to appreciate what the extent to which Indigenous Australians did that. It's unbelievable. They restructured the entire ecology of the country, or not country, of the continent. And so. That's just an aside. I'll get
that top book.
You've all know it. Yeah, that's him. Awesome. I wish that chapter went for the entire book. Like, it's just the fucking best. And yes, that upset. Like, what I wouldn't give to have a time machine and go back and film that. And that's the thing. Like, the moon, The last time someone had that type of achievement was the Aboriginals setting foot in Australia.
Yeah.
That's how big it was, because they weren't. It was far, and it wasn't.
Uncharted.
It was uncharted, and as we know, they're the first, right?
Yeah.
That it wasn't the North Americans, it wasn't South Americans, it wasn't anyone. No one was moving continents except for them at that time, and they had this singular human achievement. In the same way that Neil Armstrong was first person, and there was a first person that set foot in this country.
It's comparable, obviously. Like the last biggest thing was the Indigenous Australians coming to Australia.
I mean, because basically, because it's the first time humans did crossed an ocean to find another land, right? A true obstacle of insurmountable. Like you couldn't conceive what they were doing.
Yeah, that's right. They wouldn't have known what they were getting into, how far they would have to travel, what would happen if they landed. Would they land? Like all of that stuff is like.
And we believe, so I say we, but researchers believe. I mean, humans believe. Researchers believe that the technology that was pioneered to do that was what allowed people to move further and further and further and further and further and on and on. So I mean, arriving in Australia is the landing on the moon of the prehistorical world, and it's that's the unique part of what Neil Armstrong did, and why it's so incredible that couldn't fulfill him purely because his achievement was something in the history of a species, and him being a member of that species was the exact reason why it couldn't fulfill him, because he has the psychological capability to feel the complex emotions that allow him to not be fulfilled.
Yeah.
I just find that concept to be very interesting. I find it to be very interesting that it's his very humanity that allows him to not emotionally feel fulfilled by his representing humanity. Humanity in this, if we all die out tomorrow and aliens come 20 million years from now, his footsteps will be there.
Yeah.
With a plaque with his name on it, it's fuck. I mean, it's incredible. He did something that can be, by the very nature of physics, preserved.
Yeah.
Until the moon ends.
It's kind of described in like a little bit of his attitude towards it all. Kind of reminds me of that moment when they're in that conference and they ask. Buzz Aldrin says, "I'm going to take some jewelry of my wife's to the moon so that so she has something unique to talk to her friends about." It's like, "What about you, Neil? What do you think?" It's like, more fuel.
Yeah.
Like
if
that's
I had my choice, it'd be more fuel.
Yeah, and I feel like that's obviously that's also a testament to his character, but that's also a testament to like the lack of excitement there of even getting there. Like the actual.
It's not a lack of. I mean, that's just how he expresses himself, right? That's sort of the thesis of the film. The idea of the film is Neil Armstrong couldn't express himself.
But do you think that's also that moment that was telling that when he got there, it wouldn't be enough? It'll be amazing. It'll be such a great achievement, but he'd come back and nothing would change.
I think that, a lot changed for him emotionally.
Of course.
Like, he would talk for the rest of his life, and he didn't talk to people very much.
Yeah, right.
He hated talking to press and stuff. A private person, and he would say things like, when I looked up at the Earth and saw it there, and it was so tiny. And it's the thing of someone with an ego would be like, look, if I can hold the Earth in my hand, touch it with the tip of my finger. And he said, I didn't feel very big. I felt very, very small. And it's because he realized how utterly insignificant we are in the scheme of things, and we can achieve stuff, but what is that next to the power of the universe, the scale of the universe? He had this appreciation that you're looking at something no humans ever looked at before, and so I think that that kind of pollutes my view on that a little bit, in terms of saying it was ultimately like he didn't get anything out of it. Of course he did. Like he was a very graceful and appreciative person of the honor that he was given, and despite the cost to him and his family, I think that he was the right person. We should be forever thankful that the egotistical Buzz Aldrin wasn't the first man on the moon. Would have been.
Well, no, I agree. I think. So I don't know who I was talking to about this, but I remember that's right. I remember thinking like this film is like caused so much like you were talking about the divorce rates of people who existed in this, who went and space traveled and did these first amazing feats, and how and how much of a life change, or how much I guess I don't know if trauma is the right choice of words, how much of just a life shock it would have been to
I think it's a trauma.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, certainly the way they depict it in the film. I mean, I think that it's anyway.
But I mean, I was thinking, why would it be? And I thought to myself, like, what's the difference between them and other astronauts? The difference is that these guys are doing it first. There is no actual thing that says we're going to get home. Like, it's all chance.
So you have to always pause and remember the fact that they were test pilots every single
It's like when there's that beautiful scene where they're landing and those alarm bells are going off. It's like, what's 12:01 or 12:02? It's like, we don't know, just, kill the master alarm.
Yeah.
Not because there were not talented, amazing people working on this thing and they didn't try to make this perfect. It's just that there's so many factors to consider that all these things were redundant when they were put into practice, but they had to be considered. Like, all options had to be considered. It was so important. And that's a testament of how like that conversation he has with his kid. Not the conversation itself. We'll get on to that, but the actual idea that he has to talk to his kids about the fact of what's the probability of getting back, and his answer to that is, that's our plan. Our plan is to get back. It's like, yeah, of course that's your plan, but you don't have a statistic. There is no odds to this. There is no one's done this before. So you must you're either insane.
It takes one malfunction.
Yeah.
And a small one.
Yeah.
Apollo 13 is a perfect example of that. I mean, they could have died. And on top of that, the only reason that they got back was because they used the landing module's engine to help them get home. And
Great bit of engineering.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the things that are really important to remember is Apollo 9 went in the command module. It was supposed to take a landing module as well, but it wasn't ready in time. So it took a command module around the moon and back. So they did that. That's where the very first Earthrise photo was
that's so cool.
was taken out the window. And then Apollo 10 took the whole thing and went within, I think, a couple thousand feet of the surface of the moon to test if you could get to low altitude and then come back. I'm pretty sure that's what they did on that one. They did practice, and then internally in NASA, and from Neil Armstrong's point of view, and this is the thing that they don't ever really address in films or TV or anything like that, and they presented it to everyone at the time as, we're going to land on the moon, to beef everyone up and psych everyone up, because that's what they're doing. Internally in NASA, it was, this is our first attempt.
Yeah.
So that's why there's that great bit with Buzz Aldrin, and they have that, I think there's something wrong with the attitude adjustment or something like that, and Buzz Aldrin says, you're not going to tell them about it. If he had forwarded on the first errors before the master alarms were going off, if
they would have aborted.
They would have told them to abort immediately, and they would have lost it, and they wouldn't have gone. And the thing is, you don't get the next ride. The Apollo 12 crew get that ride if the government doesn't cancel the program, which they probably would have.
Yeah.
And so you have this. You have to always remember this mentality of they were the test pilots. Why only one scientist was sent to the moon? It was on the last flight out there on Apollo 17. One scientist, a geologist. Everyone else was a pilot. Why? Because you had to be a pilot to unfuck the situation.
Yeah.
To have any possibility of surviving. And by the time they got to 17, they went,
well, safe enough.
You know what? Let's try this.
Yeah.
Let's send a scientist down and see what we can get. Because they did it. It's not like they just kept sending the same shit. They iterated the machines as they went.
Of course.
So I had the lunar rover, and when they were driving around the surface, and when you look at the weights that they could take back of rock, it got increased. So they were changing things as they went. And so it was always that. And the problem was this, as I said to you the other day, this total misunderstanding, thanks to NASA PR, that they wanted to get everyone to the point that, yes, space travel's normal, and it's a routine thing to do. And so that's sort of the mentality that we have today. And even as we saw the other day when the Soyuz mission was aborted and the guys ejected, I'm pretty sure because of that, there's no other Soyuz to go up. They bring the guys down, and I think it's going to be the longest time or the second longest time. No, the longest time since the ISS was built that it'll be completely abandoned and just up there in space.
Yeah.
And it can be controlled from the ground because it's in low Earth orbit. It degrades in its altitude all the time.
Yeah, so they have to give it a bit of a bump.
And they bump it. Yeah. So that's kind of the big question mark is everything going to go right? And that's the thing, is that it's never not really test flights. You know, it's not ever, it's always space travel.
Yeah.
It's always leaving this Earth by the cheapest, not cheapest, obviously, the most cost-effective manner possible, not the necessarily best. It's the best with asterisks on it that are then determined by, you know, financial resources and politics and 100 other things.
So and that's the interesting thing about all this, actually, and speaking back onto the film, is that it was, so much of this was, I guess, important to that flight, but I actually think so much of this wasn't the whole point of the film. So, like, a lot of it was to do with Neil Armstrong's...
It was just him.
And his mind and what it was going through his head and his experience with it all and his wife's experience with, like... His wife's experience with Neil Armstrong going to the moon. Not his wife's experience with Neil Armstrong in general. It was that process, you know? And that's another thing what I really loved about the film, because I thought that it would be this, America, we did the moon, you know? Instead, it was this really beautiful human story. And I was saying this, like my girlfriend, not a big space person, like, you know, interested enough, but not like I am. And she would have totally, like, actually probably enjoyed this story because it was a human story about something really grand. And you could have replaced space with, you know, anything, any kind of, even made up, like, first person to touch the sun, which isn't possible, but, you know, and that still would have been a relevant and interesting story because it was actually really fascinating.
One of the things about that they really achieved in terms of it not being "Go America" and this kind of stuff, there was a real atmosphere of they fucking sent people to do this shit, like, in tin cans. Like, they really do make you... One of the things I love about the film was with each takeoff that he did, or each time that he was, like, in, you know, the plane near the stars, like... Those wonderful shots that they stick in where there's rivets.
Yeah.
Why are you looking at... It's like, they're not meaningless shots.
No.
They're going...
I love those.
Your life comes down to how good a job some person did riveting this shit.
Yeah, that's right.
And that then plays on of an attitude about how people think about your safety and what life is and what's the cost and what's the meaning, all that kind of stuff.
That was awesome.
The one of the moments that feeds into is that bit where someone says to him, "At what cost?" And it's Deke, who was Deke actually was
talking about, like, post when he does that crash, is that the lander thing,
and then they're like, you can't use that vehicle again. Because I had other ones, obviously, but you can't. We're not using those anymore. And it's like, no, it's the only way to realistically get the landing right. Yeah. To train us, it's like, at what cost? It's like, it's a bit late to ask that question, isn't it?
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Which is what he says. And one of the interesting things, by the way, they don't show in the movie is Deke, can't remember the actor's name, but he's in Super 8 and stuff, and but the one who was sort of talking and managing with the astronauts all the time, and
yeah. Oh no, I don't know.
But so Deke was an astronaut. In the early part of the program, they found out that he had a heart defect that meant he could never go to space, and so they made a position for him as, hey, you should be basically kind of like the astronaut handler. And so he was the kind of like adhesive that was between NASA and sort of going, hey, treat these people like human beings, do this, do that. And so he was trying to keep the stakeholders and and all that kind of stuff on one side, and being realistic about that stuff and what you should do, and trying to be the human being interface between him and the astronauts. And so that was his role, and that was one of the other guys in the scene. The other guy was the head of NASA, and that scene beautifully sums that up. And I think that it really it does that very well throughout the scene. People keep dying.
Yeah,
people keep dying, and that's one of the things that really. One of the things, once I realized how they were structuring the film, what timelines they were going to do and stuff, I just sat there and went, oh God, they're going to, at some point, Apollo 1's going to happen here. You know, Ed White's a character in it. I know that he dies. And when that scene started and they said they were doing that plug out test, I sunk down in my chair and I felt like covering my eyes. I started to feel a bit sick because I just obsessed about the Apollo program, I guess. So I just was like waiting for, how are they going to cover this
Yeah.
this scene. And
they did it very honorably. I know it sounds really weird, but they could have gone more graphic and to create more like drama, but they didn't. They didn't need to, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, and it happened in about like something like 20 seconds, and it flashed over as well, which is that's when they cut away, when the flashover happens. So basically the fire starts, and then it just goes and eats up all the oxygen. And as it goes, is when they cut to the outside, and you just see that pathetic smoke coming out through the hatch. Yeah. And it's quite interesting how they do it in Apollo 13. They talk about it in the lead up, and they're like, "Yeah, so these people died." And it's like, "Well, what happened, Dad?" It's like, they couldn't get the hatch open.
I was going to say, speaking about, like nauseating, tough scenes to look at, talk about sitting between two people and my inevitable...
what has that got to do with the film?
It's got a lot to do with the film, and I'll bring on to why. Because it was like, for me, I like just... I'm sure I've mentioned this. I know, I think like at the beginning of one of the podcast episodes, I literally talk about this. And it's just, I have this like weird stigma to the sounds of food being eaten.
Yeah.
Or thing being drunk. Oh, you don't do this to me, asshole. I gotta listen to this in HD. No. I've got... And so this movie, just starting, uses silence so well, because it makes a great contrast between silence and like intensity, which makes the intensity really powerful. But the silence and the like, not even my friends around me, but like the silence and just the general noise around the cinema drove me mental. I needed to be in like my own space for that. But I will talk, that leads me on to
home cinema, my friend, home cinema.
Exactly, where I don't get to spend any time with any friends. We'll just do this over a phone where I don't hear you, and I can just talk, and then we just somehow edit it together. So but I will say that leads me on to the fact that like what I really loved about the film, one, I mean, despite the fact that I also hated it, was the silence. But the second part I loved about the film was the whenever they're in the shuttle and they're kind of like, they're going through, obviously...
Spacecraft.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, spacecraft.
No shuttles yet.
And whenever they're launching, the sound design in those elements, on top of the amazing shots and the way they shot it was brilliant, but the sound elements was so... I'm a nerd for complex sound. I love listening to really complex engines or complex noises, things that have like a lot of story to tell in just the way that they sound. And that felt so good. Like almost like that was... I believe that was either completely replicated real sound of what that launch would have sounded like, or that was so well designed that made me believe that was, because that was so good.
It's my understanding is it's very well documented. The astronauts spoke about what it sounded like and what it felt like. And the thing about it was that getting used to, well, not getting used to, but the idea that you would just have to accept the fact that, particularly before the launch starts, there's a million moving parts in the entire Saturn V system, right? Including the command module and the LEM. And valves need to turn on, pumps need to be moving, you know, things need to be...
rattling and like there's no every part, it's not perfectly still
up, and bearing in mind that it's like, you know, as it goes up and all that sort of like white stuff comes off, that's ice because of the cooling that they need to keep the fuel liquid. So it's that thing of metal's going to be contracting and expanding and doing all these different things. You're suddenly going from extreme cold to extraordinary heat. Then you're going to be in a vehicle that's, you know, moving faster than a bullet.
Yeah. And then there's also the sound of when it's attached to something to when it's not.
Oh yeah.
Which I thought I really loved. They did I'm not sure how accurate it was, but to me it sounded like it made sense. It's like the moment they stop thrusting, it goes dead quiet. Because there's no movement. It doesn't need to happen. Everything's it's moving in the direction that it has been set.
And also there's no atmosphere for anything to be
pushing up against. Yeah, that's right. And it was so good. Like whenever they turned on the little jets to shift the thing, and the whole thing was like...
Yeah.
You're like, fuck, that would have been... Because
it's a gas, and from the outside of the craft, there'd be no sound.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was actually something I really loved in Gravity, was that every time they touched, so they'd be in their suit, and there'd be no sound. But then if they touched the spacecraft, you'd hear the sounds from the spacecraft reverberate through the suit. Really, not just like boom, 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 making contact with the suit. It's like if there was a sound coming through it, touch it and there'd be a rattle coming through it and stuff. And that would be the bizarre thing of being in space, is that you are never experiencing the silence. You're just really experiencing the effects of it. It's the effects of no air resistance, effects of no air. It's the sound design was excellent in the film.
But I will talk to the thing that I wasn't a big fan of, but that's not because I didn't think it was bad. It wasn't my kind of vibe, and that was the handheld camera. For me, either felt too handheld or shouldn't have been handheld at all. And I was explaining this to you when we came to the cinema, and I was like, for me, it's not even... It's the way that I see Neil Armstrong's character. There's something about his headspace which I really resonated with. Not that I feel like I'm anywhere near like an astronaut, but there was just something about like the way that he kind of processes things in his mind and stuff, the kind of quietness, but that's probably like the craziness that's going on in his own head was so beautiful. And I felt like the movement of the camera very constantly throughout that film took me away from that silence, but that kind of chaos that's in his head. And I feel like that he is an actor, Ryan Gosling, did a great job of it. Took me a little bit of time to get into it because I never thought of Neil Armstrong in that capacity. I'd never done any research on him, so I didn't see him as this kind of socially awkward kind of person. Quiet, I guess is the best way to describe it. And it wasn't until probably like 15, 20 minutes into the film when I started being like, oh man, I'm starting to love this the way he's performing this. But I felt like there needed to be more still moments, and the chaos and I guess you could say the shaky cam was in his mind. And I felt like that didn't happen enough to me, that whenever they introduced chaos in the handheld motion, it took me away from the intensity that was actually happening in the performance. That's a choice. That's not I wouldn't say to the DOP or whatever that you did the wrong thing. I just say that that's not something I appreciated in that film, and it took me away from what I thought was really amazing performances. But I actually understand this kind of documentary kind of feel. I understand that they also used the chaos of the movement in the same way they did with the sound. They went dead still with sound, and then they went absolutely apeshit to give you that contrast. They did that with the camera too. There were plenty of moments where they just cameras on sticks and you just go bam, especially once they got up into space and they did that stuff there. And that's like a great use of the technique. But for me, I didn't relate to that as well as I thought. I wish that it was less. I wish it was an easy rig. Maybe it was, but I wish it was an easy rig more than it was handheld. I felt the walking, the handheld. I felt like there was a camera team wherever they were, when I felt like I wanted to be in that room, not be watching someone filming that room, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you could totally, like,
I just didn't feel that at all. But I'm also not susceptible to like shaky cam.
You tell me. You've told me before that you watch a lot of documentary filmmaking and.
It's not just that. To be perfectly honest, the only time I've ever really thought about it is when I've gone back and watched the Born 2 and 3.
Oh my god!
And I've been like, okay, this is like unnecessarily moving all the time.
Yeah.
Like, whereas I certainly didn't feel like I saw footsteps or anything in the camera operation.
You're probably right. There probably wasn't any, but I just felt it.
It'd be interesting to see you watch it on a smaller screen because it can feel massively exaggerated in a cinema, but I didn't feel any of that.
The thing that I have any comparison to that with, as I watched Cloverfield, and obviously that was like notorious for its camera shooting.
Yeah, but I mean,
I watched it on a plane.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this movie's great because it was a tiny little screen and I had headphones on. It was awesome.
That movie is great.
I haven't seen it on a big screen.
If you like a roller coaster, it's awesome.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, like, I had an enjoyable time. I've just had people tell me I couldn't get over the camera shake.
I can't argue with it. It's almost a motion sickness thing. Same with the Bourne ones. Like, it didn't used to bother me. Now it bothers me because there's no purpose to it.
Yeah.
The Cloverfield one doesn't bother me because
that's the whole.
I'm watching someone holding a handheld, according to the narrative of the film, I'm watching someone's perspective from holding a camcorder. Doesn't bother me. So to me, it's about context and visual understanding. And as long as I am. Yeah, I always felt that it was in a juxtaposition to his state of mind is how I felt about it. And the only time that changed was when it was trying to get you have that visceral emotion of... One of the things I loved was how insane they moved the camera around when like the engines would start up and things like that.
Oh, I love that.
Like, what the fuck?
I thought that was amazing.
I'd love to see some like camera vibration tests because it was shot on film, right? And so I'm sitting there going, I wonder if like it was so intense.
Yeah.
It was so intense. I would love to see how...
I want to know, did they shake the set? Because that's what it felt like. Like, they did such a good job of that shake that it felt like they were shaking the set. But I'm sure they would have been shaking the camera. But
I think it was both.
Probably.
But a lot of the time it looked like they were on sort of 50s for that type of stuff. And so you wouldn't have to shake very much for it to be pretty exaggerated.
The only reason why I think that it might not have been shaking is because because I did quite a lot of shots of Ryan Gosling's eyes. And he was very still, and that was obviously intentionally, like, performance-wise, was the point. But it makes me feel like if I was actually shaking as much as I felt like I was shaking, then I probably wouldn't be able to maintain that stillness in my eyes. Because it'd just be like, your eyes just... But maybe I'm wrong, but, like, I just...
You just don't have to do it very much. Like, for example, all the sort of shaky cam that happens in moments of the 2009 Star Trek film, that's J.J. Abrams coming up behind the camera op and just... tapping back and forth on the film mag.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's it. That's literally, he's just going like on the back of the film mag. And so but at the front end of the camera, it's moving like, 5 mil each way.
Yeah.
But if it's a 50 millimeter lens, it's like...
It's all amplified with...
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. A lot of those shots were fairly close. They were on rivets. They were on buttons. They were on, dials, windows, whatever. They were quite compressed, close shots. But the stuff was on gimbals. Like, I've seen a few behind the scenes shots and videos and stuff like that. And it was clear that they were on gimbals. You can't do that stuff without gimbals. And from what I could tell, it looked like they did a mixture of wire and 747 shots. I think they've done some 747 weightlessness shots.
Oh, when they were like simulating space.
Yeah. And then some magnificent CG, I think, because sometimes the objects would be like floating around and doing things like that, and I'm like, that doesn't look like CG. Did they do this in the 747 or did they, CG it in? So
I mean, I don't know. It did a great job of telling that story, and once again, like a lot of it, the beautiful parts of it for me were that it was so much to do with the human story. Going back to that, I know that I kind of keep turning back into it. Because even those moments where they're like, oh, we're in space, it's like they were like a shot or maybe two where they'd like throw something and it would be like floating and that'd be the end of it.
Yeah.
They didn't glorify those moments because that's not the point. That wasn't the purpose of the film. And that's what I really liked about Prisoners. If anyone wants to listen to a podcast about that film, is that nothing was without purpose. It felt like that film was focused on exactly what it wanted to tell without, spicing stuff up, without making, bullshit come out of the air. Which is, like, I watch Transformers for that same reason. I watch it for the bullshit, for the crazy shots, and for the, like, whoa moments. But it didn't need those. The story was already wow and amazing, and it was a human story, and you didn't need to glorify anything, and they didn't. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it was... I didn't feel anything in my face, and there was no... I don't know, James Horner music, or there was no nothing was like massive. It was it felt quite light and simplistic to me. As much as I love the music from Apollo 13, it would have totally fucked this film up. So that music sort of like bum 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 bum.
Heroic.
Yeah. And it's
Is that John Williams?
No, I can't remember.
James Newton Howard? There we go. Lucky you have a copy of it right there.
James Horner. Nailed it.
Nice.
And what's really funny is I actually could not at all remember who the composer was. I was just remembering the style. I'm like, whoever it is sounds exactly like James Horner. And and not to criticize, I really like James Horner, but it's grandiose, it's romantic, it's and that's not what this.
Criticizing that would be like criticizing Saving Private Ryan. It's like there's no place for it. That's not a criticism.
People do.
Yeah, people do, but screw them.
I think people don't. Anyway, we can talk. We'll do that.
We'll watch exactly. I want to do a few war films.
It's very interesting, that film, and one of the things about this, and one of the things really interesting about the space program, and particularly just through the frame of the wives of astronauts.
Yeah.
One of the frustrating things about the role of the wife of an astronaut, because they had to just basically behave like, and saying this with like air quotes, good wives, right? 1950s housewives, that's their job. You do this. You're the astronaut's wife. Everything has to be clean cut because you're the face of the classical America. This is happening. They land on the moon in 1969 in July. This is less than a year. 1968 is one of the worst years in American history, right? It is certainly, since like you can sort of say like Civil War, World War II, 1968. 1968, Tet Offensive in Vietnam. Everyone's fucking turning on the Vietnam War. Fuck this. Why are we here? Why are so many people dying? Civil rights movement is like way up in high gear. Robert Kennedy gets assassinated. Close friend to the civil rights movement, brother of JFK, gets shot when it looks like he could become president soon. People in the student movements and the peace movements and moratorium movements, all these things are really kicking off, and you have all this progress. Feminism is going into high gear, which will then make leaps and bounds in the next decade, in the 70s, and lay a lot of important groundwork for stuff that's happening now, and that should have happened then.
Should have happened.
Had there not been some more obstacles. Should have happened 10,000 years ago. Anyway, so that's what's really happening in the world, right? And I think there is an episode of From the Earth to the Moon called 1968. I'm pretty sure that there is one. 1968 was brutal, and that's why it was like no one was giving a shit about the space program.
Yeah.
Because so much other stuff was happening. And they touch on that a little bit, and it's not the point of the film. It's not really... It's sort of like they put a nod to it, and I'm like, cool, that's done. They had a few boxes to tick, and they tick them. They can't sort of go, oh, but this never happened.
Well, how do you shape Neil Armstrong's perspective on space travel if you don't talk about the time he existed in?
Yeah.
To any degree.
Totally.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like he wasn't interacting with that.
No.
He didn't care about that at all.
Yeah. It was all about the mission.
Exactly. So it's... but from the perspective of an astronaut's wife, it's like, here's the world over here moving forward, and I'm stuck doing this in this... And so that, to me, is that, as we were saying much, much, much earlier, and it's only just a thought that I realised and thought about now. The part that would be so interesting about covering that particular area of it in greater detail, not within the context of this film, but in terms of like a TV show or a different film, because of that incredible thing where the wives of the astronauts were, it was like they got trapped in a glacier. It's like everything was moving at 100 kilometers an hour in terms of progress, in terms of the future at the time, right? We look back at it now. Didn't go drastically well, but in terms of civil rights movement, all that stuff did really, really well. But in terms of true progress overall in time, it's like this gave way to it was the Nixon era and all that kind of stuff, so it got bad, and which then introduces like a lot of other things, cynicism in government, lots of other shit. But the incredible thing about what you could do with the wives of astronauts is they're stuck in this glacier that's like locked them and very slowly, not keeping them in place, but they're progressing along with the scientific, the human progress in one way, and then in another way they're totally disconnected by circumstance from another type of a range of other types of progress that are happening. They lived in this bubble. Like, it's so they were in the 50s still. Like,
there's
it's crazy.
An amazing scene. There's two scenes in the film that remind me of exactly what you're talking about. One of them is so it was Janet Armstrong, and she was talking with her friend, that the other astronaut wife, and she's like, I never expected to marry a man that's so like normal. He's just normal. And then that, the asteroids family.
Oh, what I wanted was stability. That
was a conversation. That's right. So I wanted to marry someone that was so normal. I guess it's probably the way I should be saying that. And then there's that kind of speech about, like the dentist and how much the other wife doesn't like herself. And then there's that moment with, because for me, that moment is such a, it's kind of speaking to the story that you're talking about. It's just really, they are in a weird position as women in that environment, and very underappreciated, and very, like you said, they're there to do a job. They're there to be the wife. And then there's that moment when she goes off into the car to go to to go see Neil Armstrong, and she's being like the news reporters are all over her house and all that stuff, and she puts on that smile face and all the best as she could, and then says that line, which is it's out of this world, and then she leaves. That for me, and especially because straight after that scene, not straight after but soon after that scene, is that incredibly sad moment between them when she finally gets to see her husband, and they don't say anything. There's no oh my god, I'm so happy, you made it. There's nothing, just silence.
Their hands up against glass.
That's the closest they have, and we could talk about that scene for hours, and we will. But there's, and it kind of plays to exactly what you describe in those two moments. And like you said, you could open those two moments up and talk about, you do a whole series on that particular moment. And they might. It's a super interesting topic to bring up. And yeah, so the moment you described that is the moment I thought about those two scenes. And let's open those doors to that amazing final scene. It was a final scene of the film, isn't it?
Yeah, that's before the credits go, yeah.
Yeah, it's this...
When he's in quarantine behind glass, and and she walks into the room, and her manner completely changes once she gets through.
Yeah.
The last thing that's said to her is, "Congratulations, Janet." I think it's Deke that lets her into the room.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And
she's so sad.
Janet, and she goes in. Well, I think she looks angry when she gets in there, and it's it's this concept of, I think we talked about ages ago, where you can be on a track in a relationship, and once you're on a certain track, it doesn't matter how much longer you're together for, you're on a track that you're drifting apart,
Yeah.
and they're drifting apart, and they're at that thing of, regardless of the literal nature of the scene, in terms of, yes, they're in quarantine and she couldn't touch him, but to me, the glass has great symbolism of they never reconnect.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. That's the closest they can come again.
There's that beautiful scene as well that talks about that last moment together, because I don't think that it was just obviously the space mission that took Neil Armstrong away from his wife. I think there's that moment in the car where he's just wants to go home, and he leaves her at the party, and she's awkwardly in the car.
Wake.
Oh my god, sorry. Yes, it's a wake. That's even worse. And so she's on her way home, and then she asks that question. It's is it Karen? Yeah.
Do you ever talk about Karen?
Do you ever talk about Karen? And it's no, we haven't heard much about it. It's and
did he talk to you about it?
It's never. Never mention it to me. And that's just and then there's that scene, obviously, subsequently, where is it Ed that goes...
Ed White.
Yeah,
with
and
the
says,
swing.
"Hey, I want to talk about it." And he's like, "Do you think I left that party to come here by myself to so I?"
Oh, right, the scene after that, yes.
Yeah, and it's and obviously he's just trying to bridge the peace, and he also has that beautiful moment as well, which is just a testament to the dysfunction that is in Neil Armstrong's mind. And he has that moment when he's walking down the street and Neil Armstrong sees a seat, and he's he has this happy moment of being he opened up to me about this really important thing. It was just a sentence of information, and he's oh my god. And it's just, for me, obviously the relationship could have been dysfunctional way before, but in the film, for me, that was the point where it was revealed that they were on that separate path, that they're never going to come back again. They might, there's always a chance that the paths diverge, but that space, that achievement, that astronaut, the getting to the moon and back, that achievement before that point, it was already deviating, and it wasn't looking to return.
Yeah. And it's, it's that thing of when he gets into the program and she holds his hand and says it's a fresh start.
Yeah.
And that's what she's expecting when she goes to Texas.
I know that feeling.
She really?
No. Yeah, the time I was an astronaut?
The time that I had a daughter and she passed away, and then became an astronaut.
I feel her pain. I feel it. I understand.
I
don't. I really don't. Sorry about that.
this will be a fresh start, and that's what she's expecting when they go to Texas. So
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the really, really interesting parts about it in that way. I think they set all that stuff up very clearly. She's magnificently performed as well.
Oh yeah, I don't think any of it's subtle. I think it's just beautiful.
I would say
Like subtle.
it's not about subtlety. It's just done as opposed to done.
You didn't have to. I didn't walk away guessing any of that film.
No.
Like, I was like happy with all of it, but I love that it wasn't. There was very little. Oh man, what's that? Can't think of the word. Christopher Nolan in Inception. When they explain everything.
Oh, exposition.
Exposition. There wasn't a lot of exposition in that film. I mean, maybe there was, but I didn't sense that through the film, where it was like, unless there were certain things that you needed to explain
it was mostly like, we're doing this now.
Science
this
stuff.
test.
Yeah. This is gonna make you
those
stuff.
explanations.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I didn't never felt like I was. Oh wow, now Neil Armstrong's going through this tough time, and he's feeling this, and this is why he's feeling it. God damn it! I wish my dad was here. None of that
he
shit.
never talks to me about Karen. Like,
Yeah. That's right. It's just like,
does he ever talk to you about Karen?
yeah, never, and that's all I get.
No.
Yeah.
Not really, he says, to try and soften the blow.
Yeah.
Do I talk to you? Never. It's like,
That's all you needed to say.
that's really what's being talked about.
Yeah, that's right.
He doesn't talk about it, full stop.
Yeah, done.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what I thought was really
No,
magical.
it was really good.
How are you feeling?
Yeah,
There's so much to talk about in the sense of it as a historic moment in science, but I'm happy to do a podcast about.
I'd separate it. It's not.
That wasn't the point of the film. The point of the film wasn't.
It's the emotional.
Look at this amazing achievement. It was look at this human story about it, and I don't.
Who did this?
Yeah.
Not what happened is really the difference. And a lot of time, if you want the what happened and you want it well, watch a documentary.
Do you know what also gave me tingles?
I don't need to know about all your medical things.
Nice. It was for me so much to all that moon stuff. I was so excited.
You mean the film?
In the film, when he was on the moon.
Oh, right.
When they landed on the moon.
The whole that's the whole point. That's what happens in the film, right?
Yeah. The whole film. No, every moment once they land on the moon, even before they land on the moon, but specifically when they land on the moon, just it looks so amazing. It just made me. I was so pity.
One of my absolute favorite things that they did was allow truly the amount of time I was worried he would like step off and be like, that's what small step. I knew they built it to a moment, but as he got down the ladder, I was like, oh, please stand on the bottom of the lem for a while, like he really did.
Yeah, waiting for the signal or the camera angle or something like that, wasn't it? Something to do with like there was a media thing.
It was a combination of stuff. Yeah. Because it had to be the moment, right?
Yes.
It's like he's looking down, but you can't. It doesn't matter sort of how emotionally mixed up or detached or whatever you are. Of course, Neil Armstrong was standing there going, I'm about to make the first footprint.
Yeah.
I'm about to do this.
And the way it looked, like the dirt, the way that the ground, the shape of it, the fact that it wasn't because of low gravity in that environment, like not zero gravity obviously, but low gravity, just the way that the grains fell onto the ground because they'd never been stepped on before, never been crushed, and how they don't fall onto each other because there's not enough gravity. That some of it kind of raises in little. It's almost like you zoomed into a picture of one grain of sand and it's all bumpy. It's kind of like, all that
so
shit.
well done.
So good.
It's that, and then one of the things they did really well was that, basically every astronaut land on the moon. I don't think this was the case with Neil Armstrong. But with basically every astronaut land on the moon at some point had to be told, like, get the hell back in the lem.
Yeah, that makes sense. How long do they get to be on the moon for? Is it like 15 minutes or is it like 5 hours? Do you know?
I'd have to look it up because it was, as I said before, like the supplies and things totally changed through time. So
yeah, right.
Like the lengths of time there on the moon just increased and increased. And
so maybe the first time was like 20 minutes, and then
I think it was half an hour for the first one, and then there was like an hour one and stuff. But in total, I think they spent like 3 hours on the moon.
Yeah,
Like,
because they would have had to
around?
wait for the timing and everything to go back to rendezvous with the ship, as well as like.
Oh no! They spent 3 days on the moon. What I mean is
really?
yeah, I think it was 2-3 days. Yeah.
Oh wow.
something like that. But it was like in terms of
Actually,
feet on the moon,
Yeah.
it was like 3 hours or something, and then it was like I think it was something like 2 or 4 days or something of walking around and doing stuff at the end, because they had the moon rovers and they go really far and come back and look at different things. I had
you don't send someone like that to
supplies, I had all
science.
sorts of stuff. Well,
you try.
you do. You just wait until the last guy because they never had scientific objectives
Yeah.
in those raw terms. So basically, they were collecting rocks all the time, and that was one of the complaints of the scientists. Is like, you guys, they were trained. They were all trained in how
Geology
to look at, try and find good rocks. And but you still had other problems. Like the geologists have found a rock there that was significant, but they thought they found like it was kind of like the god rock, this really important rock that would unlock a lot of things about the solar system. It turned out it was like it had to be a particular color, and it was kind of like this like coppery, goldish kind of color, if I remember correctly, like coppery orange or something. And it turned out it was like reflection of light off of the lem, like light bouncing off of the gold and it illuminating a rock in a certain way. And so he picked it up, but he could never see it because you got the visor down.
Yeah.
So when they got back to Earth, it's like, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
It was an important rock, that one, but it wasn't like the important rock they were expecting. And they did so. Yeah, it was so many crazy things happened. Like one of the things that no one ever really talks about is the fact that because they had like. And one of the first tests that was one of the most important was finding out if the moon was a dead body. So, they put the seismometers, I think they're called.
Is that something that measures the seismic?
Movement.
Activity.
And the way that they would test that it was working was the back end, the final stage of the Saturn V was on a trajectory to, after they'd landed, collide with the moon.
Really?
Yeah, they did it for every Apollo mission.
So there's like a bunch of Saturn rockets just like blown up on the one side of the moon.
Yeah, well, not blown up probably, but like smashed. But they were like, hey, if it's a dead thing, it'll have no background vibration, and therefore
The only thing you'll get
this spike. And it happened every time. It was the only vibrations they ever had was from the Saturns smashing into the moon.
That's super interesting. The things to learn. These are the things.
So much stuff.
Yeah, this is why we need to do a separate
Tiny
podcast
details
about
that
it.
no one ever really like. You can't. It's like it'd be the most boring fucking movie.
Yeah, dude.
And now this lands here, and now there's what was that?
Exactly.
Anyway, cool.
Yeah, man.
Good movie. Liked it. Can't wait to own it.
Absolutely, and I'm really excited to own it as well because I just think it's such a beautiful thing. I want to see again.
Always Coca-Cola.
You finally got to do it. Coca-Cola, please sponsor us. I hope they don't not that they can see what we're doing. That you're using a Soda Stream, right?
Drinking.
I wonder if they listen to it and they're like, "That's a Soda Stream. That's not actually Coca-Cola."
Yeah, that is not a patented.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, dude, man. Thank you so much for watching this film with me and then doing like another podcast about it.
That is, you're welcome, dude, man.
Yeah. Did I say dude, man?
You did.
Yeah. Well, that's that's recorded for all history now.
It is.
Bye.
Sorry, when I picked up my phone, I saw what?
You'll see.
I don't care. I love it.
All right, so I almost forgot to do one of my favorite segments on whenever we do these kind of podcasts, and that is name or like what is the budget?
Oh, fuck. I have no idea. It looked like about 50 mil.
Yeah. Close. I want you to guess
close, but it's actually like 90. That's not close.
I want you to guess the box office at the same time. Obviously currently, because it just came out.
Yeah, I don't know, like 25, 30?
Ooh, really? You think it did that badly? Like half its cost?
It's not fucking Marvel, is it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. No.
It's hard to pick these films.
Of course it is.
It's so hard to pick. It's either, no one gives a shit about. Like, you can say, oh, it's from the director of Whiplash and La La Land. It's like, it's not Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, no.
Spielberg doesn't draw audiences. It's hard to know.
You're pretty close to the budget, 59 to 70 million. And the box office was 75.6 million at the moment.
Fucking good on him.
Yeah, hell yeah.
That is, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I wish it was way more.
Oh, yeah, but
it won't be.
It's going to smash it on home media and distribution and stuff. That's exactly the kind of thing that people will not go
Eat
to
up.
see at cinema.
Yeah.
will wait to watch at home.
Because
That's good on him.
yeah. No, that's pretty. And I just enjoy doing that because I can see the answers and you don't know them, and you're pretty good at guessing these things. So I have fun with it. All right.
Yeah, I find it interesting because he's quite cheap, I believe. So
Who?
Ryan Gosling.
Oh yeah, I imagine he's a pretty low grade actor.
No, like indie.
No, I'm joking. It's like, what are you? Do you meant that seriously? I thought he was super expensive.
I wouldn't think so. Probably $500,000 or $1 million or something like that.
Man, that's a so we are.
I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
He does a lot of. He predominantly does indie stuff. He doesn't do that many gigantic. He does mostly, $40 to $70 million.
Yeah, that's a
films.
good point.
He does
Actually,
small
I can't think of any massive like huge.
Blade Runner. That's about it.
Oh my god, yeah. Can't think of any massive movies.
But yeah, it's like Lars and the Real Girl and Drive.
God, he did Blade Runner.
Yeah.
What a good role.
Yeah. Do you know what's so funny? I would just say about him, by the way, and I think he did it really well, but people always say that he plays the same thing every time. It's just sort of this muted kind of, I'm not feeling anything. I'm subtly feeling emotion. I find him to be an incredibly striking and very intense actor. I find him to be very intense and perfectly... I just think he's really good at micro expression. I find him to be incredibly compelling. I like him a lot. Really.
I like him as an actor a lot. I don't know how I feel about him in that respect. That could be, I mean, you know what?
He's a really awesome dude.
Yeah, hell yeah. I like him. I think he's awesome. I love The Nice Guys.
Did you ever see that, the guy that made this, you've seen like Ryan Gosling won't eat his breakfast?
Yeah, that's the
Won't eat his
best.
cereal, and then the guy died and...
Oh, what?
Yeah, the guy that made that passed away.
Oh.
And when he passed away, Ryan Gosling made a video of himself eating breakfast.
Oh,
Eating
that's
cereal.
That's super sweet. Yeah, no, I obviously I have things to say, but I do really love Ryan Gosling as an actor.
Yeah, I think he's really good. The thing that's funny is I just think that there's a huge difference between each of his emotionally repressed roles.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
What I find.
Yeah.
They're all very different people. It's not like Drive where he seems all muted and all that kind of stuff. And then he stomps a person's fucking face in.
Yeah,
shocking the girl that he's falling for.
Yeah, that's right. It's no, totally different.
You're not getting that from Neil Armstrong. He's not going to smash someone's face in.
Never.
And
even when he's being yelled at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in Blade Runner, it's like, well, he's a Blade Runner, so that's the...
He's a bit of a robot, but no, I thought that he was... No, you're completely right. That's actually a really great way to describe it, because, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Drive or Only God Forgives.
I haven't watched Only God Forgives, but I've heard it's not very good.
Okay, well...
yeah, I've mostly heard that it's like... It feels sort of self-indulgent from a filmmaking point of view, as opposed to being a compelling story. That's what I've heard about.
No, that's fair. And to be honest, I don't know. I wouldn't stretch to say that the reason why those films I didn't enjoy was because of Ryan Gosling, like him himself. I would say that for me it was something to do with the directing and the editing, and my expectations, especially in Drive.
You expected Fast and Furious?
No, I didn't. What did I expect? We could talk about this forever. This is like a
Well, we should do On a Drive sometime.
We should, yeah. I might cut a lot of this out.
Have you watched Lars and the Real Girl?
I have, and that was amazing. That was so good. I really enjoyed him as an actor, and he does play those. He seems to be a unique actor in every role in that respect. I wouldn't call him a chameleon, but I'd certainly call him like.
I kind of think it's like you've seen Crazy Stupid Love.
Oh man,
with Steve.
Yeah, yes, Steve Carell. I think I have. Yeah.
Come on. Oh man, surely that movie fucking rocks.
Yeah, maybe I haven't.
You see him as this like sleazy suave.
Yeah, totally. With what's her name? Emma Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did. I have seen that movie.
I haven't seen La La Land, by the way, so I don't know if he's like.
Oh, that was great.
He's like woo 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 in that too. I don't know, but that movie was like a great example of him being not like he was charismatic and stuff.
Oh, totally. I don't mean when I say he's not a chameleon in this. I don't mean it in that respect. I mean it in like my first thought is often that's Ryan Gosling.
Okay. I don't know.
And it's very rarely that I go,
yeah.
this is the character, and oh my god, that's Ryan Gosling playing him. And that could be a visual thing, that could be like a lot of things. It's not even anything to do with him himself, but I just know there's a few actors which I just get blown away by. I'm like, whoa, my god, that's that actor? I didn't even think of it. And it also could be because he's quite famous. Like, he's very recognizable.
Yeah, there's not many actors I don't figure out who they are unless for some reason they're doing a crazy makeup job on them. So
yeah, true.
For me, he is a chameleon, but it's like an emotional character chameleon. I see. To me, that's what a chameleon means. It doesn't mean that I can't tell who it is by looking at them. To me, it means that like I can't distinguish who the actual where the actor begins and where the character where the actor ends and where the character begins. If I can't tell the difference between that, it's that sort of thing. Whereas like Tom Cruise, I'm like, I just want to fucking watch Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And get blown up.
Yeah, that's right. It's not Ethan Hunt, it's Tom Cruise. Yeah, anyway, thank you very much for potting again.
You're welcome.
And yeah, well, we all love Ryan Gosling.
Hells yeah.
And we'll do this later. Thank you, cockatoos. So that's the podcast for today. Stay tuned as there will be a new episode released every single Thursday. And to keep up to date, don't forget to subscribe using Podbean or wherever you get your podcast. On this episode, I want to give another special shout out to Josh Lumberg for coming back again and again and again. This podcast was produced and edited by me, Piotr, and the music was sourced from the Filmstro website. Till next week, thank you for listening.